Hello everybody, and welcome to my review of volume number 9 of Fujino Omori's light novel series, Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? Which I'll just call DanMachi like we do for short, because it's a lot less of a mouthful. So in volume number 9, this is now the beginning of a brand new arc. This is the first volume after the short story volume of number 8. Which, if you saw my review, I was pretty impressed by. It was one of the better short story compilation type volumes. Now, this one starts off basically with Belle discovering a lost and injured girl in the dungeon. The only problem being is that she apparently is a monster. This sets in motion a whole chain of events that pretty much is shaking everything right down to its core. This volume is number 1 of a 2-part series. Volume number 10 will sort of, I guess, resolve this story. Although I cheated a little bit and I did kind of look at just like the little blurb type things. No real spoilers for future volumes. It looks like there's going to be a lot more outcome and fallout of this series beyond just books number 9 and 10. So it's a bit of a new arc, going to take up a couple of volumes. If you follow this channel, if you've watched my reviews of the other DanMachi volumes, you know that I love this series. It is probably one of the better, if not one of the best, written light novel series that we have currently available in English. It's just really, really well plotted. The volumes, for the most part, increasingly have been larger than a lot of other light novels, and yet pacing-wise, they always do a really, really good job. Like this one, to say that Belle discovers this girl in the dungeon, that is like the first 5-6 pages that happens. The book never feels slow, it never feels dull. I think it's because even though they have sort of that, they take that moment to get to know this girl and sort of, develop her relationship with the other members of Hestia Familia. It always feels like there's stuff going on because there is this threat, of course. I mean, a group of adventurers taking in and protecting a monster. Obviously, it's like a recipe for disaster in any number of ways. And I think what I really appreciate about this series, aside from the fact that it's well written and the pacing is always really, really on par, I think what I really like about this series is that it is constantly challenging Belle, the main character. We have this main character who, in a lot of other series, might come off as being really one-dimensional and plain. He is this really, really decent, good-hearted kid. And it's funny how the series started off with this whole perception that he had that, a man's romance is to become an adventurer and get a harem and everything else. And even though he's pretty much accomplished that, he is so innocent and so good-natured and in many ways so naive that he doesn't even realize it. In fact, when girls overtly come on to him, he panics and runs and can't handle it. So we have this character who in a lot of ways, if it was a different series, well, you know what, he may be a typical harem type main character. But instead, because we have a series that constantly challenges him, because we have a series that constantly is focused on his belief in himself, his belief in others, his determination to become better and stronger, it changes the whole narrative. And I'm really impressed that this series keeps finding new ways to challenge him. So in the beginning, of course, we had him arriving. He thought, okay, I'm going to get into this city. I'm going to become an adventurer. I'm going to join this family. I'm going to become really, strong. And he ends up being like alone with only one goddess and himself. No money. They're living in like a basement. But even then, he tries to make the best of it. He tries to become better because he wants Hestia to be happy. But it's still challenging him, right? It's not the experience that he thought he was going to have when he first arrived in the city. Then, of course, he is put down. He has an experience that makes him feel like he can never be an adventurer. He meets eyes in a pretty much unfortunate situation where she has to save his life. And it is that meeting which sets this whole thing off of him trying to become stronger. In volume number 7, which, I mean, up until I'd say like we get into this volume, definitely volume 7, one of my favorite volumes of the series. And in that volume, we start talking about prostitution, human trafficking, people being sold into prostitution, and a very, very dark narrative. And really, I would say that volume is beginning to challenge Belle with the whole idea that this city is not shiny. This city and the people in it are dirty and dark, and there is this underbelly to it. And it leaves him questioning things, and yet it shows that character's growth, that he overcomes it and in his own way keeps pushing forward despite all of the obstacles in his way. In this volume, we now have something different. We now have his perceptions of the dungeon being challenged. The dungeon has always been a really simple thing. It births monsters, the monsters try to kill you, you either kill the monsters or you die, and that's it. You get your drop items, you cash them out, you call it a day. That's how it's always worked. That's how it's worked as long as anybody knows. And all of a sudden now, we have a monster who can talk. We have a monster who looks at him with human eyes and is having human emotions and is capable of pain and sorrow and sadness, but happiness and joy and love. And what is a good kid like him supposed to do? Will he cave to the pressure of societal norms and abandon her? Or will he stay true to who he is and his own sense of justice? And will he pursue trying to protect her? And I was really, really impressed with the way that this book kind of challenged all those things and pushed him as a character. I appreciated the fact that even though his family, who are, you know, very supporting, and it's a great cast in general in this series, but I loved that even though there was some support, that we have characters still having doubts, that really the only reason that they're getting behind this is because of Belle and because of their support for him. But they keep having doubts. They keep doubting that this is even possible. And it's those little fractures in the family that you see. And even this whole idea that some of them think the idea that, you know, Belle is a great kid and is a hero, and we love him for that, but we also need to protect him from himself even. I loved seeing all of these little sort of cracks in the family and sort of the way that some of these people view Belle, that yes, they view him so positively and realize that he is such a good kid that he actually has faults and he's actually putting himself and others in danger. I liked that it wasn't sugar-coated and that that part wasn't wiped away and that the characters were made unrealistic. I also appreciate that we have a character in Belle who is self-aware. That's one of the other things I would say that sets Belle apart from a lot of other harem-type characters. We have a character who is conscious of the decisions he's making. He is aware that his desire to protect this being is putting his family in danger. He's aware of the risks and what could happen. And he doubts himself and wonders to himself, am I making the right decision? This character questioning himself and being self-reflective, it's really refreshing for a lot of other books. And because this series has been so consistent in that way, I just can't help but love it. And I burned through these volumes like, some books, when they're 250, 300 pages, some light novels, they take me longer to get through because it feels like a bit of a slog. But this one, I plowed through it no problem whatsoever, the way I do with all of the DanMachi novels. There's really nothing else I can say other than It's a great volume. It sets up a new arc in a really surprising way. It puts this whole new twist on the dungeon and plays more with this idea that we've had sort of hinted at in other volumes, which is almost that the dungeon in a way is alive, that the dungeon is almost like a living thing. And there's been these questions about, is there even a consciousness at work in the dungeon? In this volume, we find out a bit more about the dungeon. We find out quite a lot about the background of the guild and how the guild works and what their hierarchy is in the guild. So even in Volume 9, we're still world building. And even in Volume 9, we're taking something like the dungeon, which should be probably the most straight ahead part of the whole series, and we're still making it far more complex and interesting and questioning whether we really know what this thing is or not. And it's great to see the characters have that realization and have Bell doubting himself and sort of questioning how he's going to go ahead, knowing that the monsters he might be attacking in the dungeon are sentient. They're not just mindless, bloodthirsty beasts. It changes everything, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes forward from this point, and to see just how this whole storyline plays out. Really, it sounds to me like, having read this volume, it seems like Bell has been on a very big meteoric rise. Like, he started off as this kid that was nobody and nothing and was laughed about, what did they call him? The tomato head or whatever, because like he was all covered in red. Like, he was downplayed and everything else. Everybody doubted him. He has worked his way up. People who harassed him in the past now actually view him as an equal. It seems to me like, because of what's happening in this book, we're going to see that knocked down a peg. And as much as I love to see my heroes rise, and I don't really want to see them get knocked down, it's really fits with this series that's what's probably going to happen. Like I said, this whole thing where Bell is constantly challenged, his assumptions are constantly challenged, and what makes him a really heroic and fun and interesting character is how he pushes himself through and how he evaluates himself in those situations. Volume number 9 continues that trend. It's a great volume in my opinion. Like I said, it's probably one of, if not the best light novel series that we get in English, and especially when we talk consistency of volumes. I don't think there's been a volume yet that I felt was not a really rewarding read. Like I said, even the short story volume, which typically I'm not a big fan of those, it still was a really good book. So volume number 9, if you kind of wondered where the series was going to go next, it's going in crazy directions and changing up everything. But so far, it's a real fun ride, and I highly recommend it. So those are my thoughts on volume number 9 of Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? Really, I still, I say it almost every video, it's a really unfortunate name, because when people see me reading that book, they're like, man, that sounds like so stupid, and yet I have to sit there and try and tell them, like, no, this is actually a really good series. Like, it's a way better fantasy series than what you would give it credit for just based on the title. But anyway, nonetheless, my next review is going to be a catch-up review. I still have, I've got like 2 volumes of Strike the Blood, 2 volumes of Excel World. I'm trying to get caught up, but first I thought I would get caught up with Bakemonogatari. I'm going to be reading the third and final volume in the Bake part of the Monogatari series, that being Tsubasa Cat. So yeah, that's going to be my next review. So if you're new to the channel and you love light novels, you should consider subscribing. I do 2 to 3 reviews every single week, as well as a weekly countdown of the top 10 best-selling light novels in Japan. Thank you all for joining me in this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.